afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session or this panel on language and education. We're a little behind the time, but we are moving along. In this panel, you will hear presentations from Dr. Carolyn Dyche, Ms. Elizabeth Montoya-Steeman, and Drs. Rocky Mead and Nicole Scott. At this time, Dr. Carolyn Dyche will be making her presentation on the academic literacies, Legitimacy Struggle, Advocacy Insights of a UWI Scott worker. Each participant will have 20 minutes, followed by a 10-minute slot for questions, answers, and comments. Dr. Carolyn Dyche is a lecturer in the language section, Department of Language, Linguistics, and Philosophy. She's currently the coordinator of the Foundation Language course for at-risk students, that is, those who fail the English language proficiency test. She's also a coordinator of a level 3 course, titled The Art of Public Speaking. And her main research interest is language education policy. I also invite you to read page 12 of your program sheet, where you will see an abstract on this session related to this presentation. At this time, let us welcome Dr. Dyche.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start by putting my cards on the table with respect to Professor Devinish, because he's largely responsible for any kind of activism that I have engaged in at this university. He's also largely responsible for my completion of the PhD. So let me just make that clear. So I want to commend the conference organizers for putting on this conference in his honor. And just to say that this month of October is so appropriate. Not only is it Heritage Month, and it's all about heroes and boldness and pride of identity and self-reliance, but I don't know how many of you were at the Walter Romney Symposium Forum the other day. And of course that was all about 50 years ago and student riots and activism. So it's a really nice dovetailing for this conference to be held at the same time when we're having the recognition of our heroes and student activism. But more importantly, for the purposes of this particular paper, it's also timely because from our point of view as persons who teach the reading and writing courses in the academy, we are celebrating the launch of an association called CATAL. It's a mouthful, Caribbean Association of Tertiary Level Academic Literacies Practitioners. What I want to say is that about 21 years ago, this association was conceived at a forum, at a colloquium that was held by people like myself, Eric King, Monica Taylor, Ingrid McLaren, and we invited a lot of teachers. It was really a call for activism, and out of it was birthed a paper calling for such an association, a professional association to achieve certain goals. That was 21 years ago. Now, we actually launched it in May of this year again. The association was, as Monica Taylor said, when she introduced, she was a guest speaker at our launch in May. She made the point that while we should be celebrating a coming of age, we just come. We were actually stillborn. So that kind of gives you a little bit of insight already into the whole challenge of activism in terms of our context of people who teach in a very labor-intensive area with large numbers of students, okay, and lots of papers to mark. So things like activism and oftentimes research sometimes have to take a back seat. But today, this afternoon, what I want to do is to achieve two main goals. So my presentation will have a two-part structure. I want to, first of all, address this question of the legitimacy struggle that I'm referring to, that over time, advocacy attempts have really been directed towards making us legitimate. And basically give you a sense of what we are really advocating for, and also shamelessly indulge in this advocacy in terms of academic literacy, so you can see what we're doing, since this is all about sounds of advocacy. And then secondly, I want to present some of the insights for my successors, like Khadisha and Jessie, and the new, the successors to and Eric King and Ingrid McLaren and myself and Dr. Taylor, some insights that I have gleaned over these many years of struggling on this plantation. Now, Junior Gong has a song that says, "The struggle discontinues." Well, if the struggle continues, then when will we overcome? Right here and now, my struggling end, prosperity from now on. So he doesn't want to hear about la lucha continua, and I'm all lucha'd out. So this is an attempt to really, pass the baton in a sense, and give the younger generation a heads up. Okay, so first, to address the question of what it is that we have to advocate for and why, I want to kind of focus on the issue of nomenclature. I'm not sure if that's the right pronunciation, but anyway, we're going to go with that. In this field, because in a sense it symbolizes the changing of the names of what we do and our kind of hesitation to kind of style ourselves. Who are we really? Kind of symbolizes the issues and the challenges that we face in terms of our teaching and certainly in terms of our scholarship. And you can understand that our original name, certainly people in this institution, we came under a Department of Linguistics and Use of English. And so the whole business of English was in the forefront. Now, the truth of the matter is that, as you can see from the title, what we do is really perceived in terms of talking about Scot work. I like that term, Scot work. It reminds me of Dickens. I didn't look it up, but I think it has something to do with like the ashes and the coals and, you're cleaning all of the Scot. Right. So that is how we really have been viewed in the academy. And there's a little, I'm not the originator of this term. It actually comes out of the US context, where college composition courses was described as academic Scot work, with which lowly staff members are saddled. And so, as you can see, we come from a position of a very low status. And that is synonymous with terms like bonehead English. That is what they use in the US. And in Jamaica and in the UAE, we had useless English. And then, of course, we were equated with remedial English. That was basically our territory. Okay? And the context for this, of course, is the whole business of equating English with language, and English as a mother tongue tradition, all of these myths that we operate out of and under in this kind of context, this post-colonial context. Use of English, if you look back at the documents, you will see that it wasn't really about the code or the medium of English. English was really supposed to be the vehicle of thought. And it was really about George Carr, who was in the actual English department, then had both literature and language, language in terms of use of English. And the aim was that students were to use the course to help them to, and I'm quoting him, to inhabit a verbal world with relevance, confidence, and discrimination. Okay, there's nothing about English there. So the term use of English, and in fact, when you look back, there is something about uses of English, which kind of gets a little bit more closer to what it really was. From the very beginning, there was confusion about really what are these people doing in the academy, because surely we are all mother tongue speakers of English, and why would we be doing high school English at the UWI? Okay, so what in fact, that was the perception, what in fact were we really all about? And the truth of the matter is that over time, we have changed, and we as practitioners have had to constantly redefine and interrogate what we are doing, always in the context, of course, of the academy, where you also want status in terms of your research agenda and scholarship. And so very quickly, you would see that the persons who offer these courses would have stressed that, in fact, we're not about just English, but we're about academic language proficiency, looking at thought, how you, critical thinking. So there was a lot in terms of, we actually trespassed into philosophy and logic. So we had reasoning in everyday discourse, and we were looking at coherence and really evaluating ideas for their cogency. So it was all about trying to develop students' thinking and provide that bridge from high school into the academy. And so there was a lot of, and so eventually Youth of English came out from the Department of English, which was literature, and which was a high status, the high status element of that department, and started, you know, its own trajectory. Eventually we aligned ourselves with linguistics. So the point is that the academic language proficiency was one of the areas that we started to point to, that we're looking at thinking and language abilities, grammar, and all of that. But it wasn't the only one, okay? There were lots of different areas that over time this course represented. And certainly the agenda of Caribbean linguists was very important. When I was a student here, there was a lot of information about what is language, trying to combat linguistic prejudices, varieties of language. There was rhetorical analysis. I mentioned the whole business of looking at cogency of argument, what we call reasoning in everyday discourse. So we would say to the philosophers, we're not really trespassing, we're looking at discourse here, we're not looking at formal logic. And we were looking at things like political propaganda and advertisement, because in those days, and you're talking about the 60s and the 50s really, coming out of there was a mass communication media, and there was a sense that students were, you know, buying into all of this. These appeals that they needed to be critically analyzing. There was also the use of figures, the whole business of you know, using statistics to deceive. Okay, so all of this happening, and from the outside, people not realizing what was going on. So these, the whole business of intellectual standards, and these are slides that we use now when we actually teach in the course. We look at all of these and we say, how do you apply them in your various disciplines, and what do they mean? And we look at elements of thought. So here am I doing the plugging for what we do, okay? Habits of mind. But I put these concepts and these slides to you basically to say that even before the early in the 60s, the persons who were here, who were teaching Youth of English, many of whom were linguists, sociolinguists like Winford. I think Professor Devenish taught Youth of English at one point in time, and many of them. So they were infusing their agendas, but also not being caught up just with English, although the English problem remained, and there was always this issue of why aren't you doing what you're supposed to be doing? These students are coming out, and they are not writing correct English, okay? So if you look also at the wider scene, not just what was happening in the UWI institution, this quote here actually comes out of the US, and they were also grappling with the whole business of more and more students coming into the academy, the democratization of education, and there was the birth of basic writing, and they also had to contend with the fact that everybody wanted the students to be having correct grammar, and they were making the case that it can't just be about grammar. It has to be about different ways of thinking and all of the different and reasoning. So I found this quote from 1973 by Winford, linguist who was involved in Youth of English at the time. And I thought to myself, in fact, we have kind of come full circle, where he was basically looking at the the fact that we're not just concerned with the code or the medium, but that you also have to look at the wider sociolinguistic context, which is what we do now, which is what we do at CAPE, which is what we do in the courses that we offer here when we are looking at writing and reading. We situate it first in terms of who we are as persons who live in a Creole-speaking, majority Creole-speaking environment. This quote by Winford, students are introduced first of all to information on the nature of language as a specifically human faculty. This is followed by a detailed look at the roles of language varieties in their social context, the nature of standard and non-standard languages, and the characteristics of Creole languages such as those used in the Caribbean area. And he speaks about how important it is for people to be able to have this language awareness and this general linguistic knowledge, and ends by saying objective knowledge of these matters is not, unfortunately, very commonplace. So you can see that, you know, the problem continues, but this was from 1973. So just to speak about the term, before I go and look at the at what I have learned, just to say a little bit about the name that we have now chosen to adopt as this fledgling group of activists in terms of our association. We are calling ourselves, as I say, the Caribbean Association of Academic, Tertiary Level Academic Literacy Practitioners, and we've actually aligned ourselves with a British model, with a British orientation, which is not just rhetoric and composition, which tends to come out of the US. As I should say that the group is very small and it will be open to discussion when we build up in terms of the membership, but for now, we actually have gone with that, and we make a distinction between academic literacies and academic literacy, which is what we have been doing most of the time, which is just looking at the language and then also critical thinking. And so we have expanded our notion of what it is to be people like us in the academy by aligning ourselves with this definition, which comes out of as I say, the UK, which looks a little bit more at the institution, at the politics of the institution, at the politics that have to do with our speakers, okay? And the whole business about not having just these kind of static views of what is text in a particular discipline or across disciplines. And it embraces the technology and technological literacy, and as you can see, it looks at diversity. So this is what we are using as a beginning to launch this new association, and we haven't worked out everything. We're going to have to really sit down and say, what does this mean for us? And also, what does it mean for us to be a Caribbean association? Because we have looked towards the UK and towards the US. The US actually has a concept called the center and the periphery. And when they speak about rhetoric and composition and academic literacy, they see themselves as the center and we are the periphery, okay? And so really, it's up to us to actually forge a distinct identity, so we're not just, you know, saddled in the periphery with every other part of the world that is non-US. And so this is the importance of such an association. Okay. I wanted to just illustrate to you a little bit about how we deconstruct in our courses this whole issue of language in Jamaica. Now, we use this most when we're looking at editing and proofreading, but not just that. In 2007, we got a lot of flack, people like myself, because Mark Wignall wrote a column, How Did He Enter UE, where he basically just included the letter of a UE student that was full of grammatical errors and the sentence structure errors and spelling and apostrophe and everything like that. And we look at it and we talk about most of the students laugh and talk about it. And then we say, but what is he saying? What is he saying? And we actually start to look at the content of the letter. This is just a part of it. And in fact, the content of the letter is very strong in terms of critical thinking. He goes into, you know, this view and that view and the context, etc. And so we say to them, you know, the point is this is a good letter, but you know what, a lot of people miss the point. Okay, they miss it. So basically, our area, okay, And I'm quoting from Louis Wilson and Summers, who is a Scott work. These are the ones who originated the Scott work thing. Says we need to give reason for our more complex readings of student literacies and advocate for the importance of critical literacy, without which the public slips back into the simplified language of grammar skills, deficits, and remediation, and uses it against the most disempowered. Okay, my time is running out. I'm going to skip to the insights. The insights, pardon? 5 minutes is a long time. The insights, okay, that we have gained from, that I have gained from working for 30 years. I'm getting long service in December. 30 years. And well, I'm saying that because when I came in 1988, it was to develop the English language proficiency test and to introduce this course to which I'm now wedded. Okay. And so, having gone through that long journey, to say to a Jessie and a Kedisha and think, first of all, and it's good that you have a linguistic background, to be sensitive to language ideology. I came in here very naive, coming out of a background of English literature and French and Spanish, and nothing to do with linguistics, apart from the use of English course, which Catherine taught me. Okay, and it was and so my thesis, for those of you who know it, is all about starting at the wrong point and not realizing that what was it actually said in the documents, a lot of it is mythical. And so I was looking and saying, well, this is the goal of policy, and I'm going to evaluate this goal. And the more I went into it, I realized, well, this is not the goal. This is not the goal, and I had to do a double take and kind of, you know, wheel and come again. So contend with myth versus reality. What is said, I mean, I've already mentioned the myth of mother tongue, English as mother tongue. There's a myth of transience, which Professor Devenish knows. When I came here, how they got me here was they said, just for 3 years until the problem is fixed. And I had a terminal contract for 3 years because we're going to just get rid of it, okay? Know the institutional and the disciplinary history. And enough has been written now, Dr. Milton Wright, myself, people in other institutions, so you can know the players. It's a political minefield, and the players are constantly changing. So we have had Professor Shirley, and before that there was Beckles, and before that there was Preston, and before him there was Philip Sherlock, and all of them. Just as you say, tourism is everyone's business, our courses everyone's business, and everybody is going to interfere, is going to they have a stake. They're all stakeholders. So you need to know that and learn from history. Consider leveraging the Creole English debate. Sometimes when you want to get the English thing or the writing thing, you know, sometimes you have the Creole bogey, which has been used. How did the remedial course come in? When Professor Devenish's book, Language and Liberation, was published, and there was a newspaper article in it speaking about Creole literacy, there was a dean of one of the faculties who was appalled, and he had been against us having a course for the at-risk students. And the specter of having Creole literacy was such that he basically moved in our direction and said, yes, we'll have that course with the students who are having problems with English. So that needs to be done. Be strategic, read your terminology. This is Alsop, okay? Alsop from an interview. He introduced the term English language proficiency. He used it as a palliative, according to him, because to refer to the issue of the needs. And he speaks about how it came out of Cambridge and he felt it would be more receptive. You know, he used it as a seller, but the notion was English grammatical structure. So right through the history, when you look at policy, you see people, Figaro, who started it off, who wanted a course on logic, on language and consequential expression, but everybody wanted grammatical English, and that's so use of English came about. So there's this whole kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say disingenuousness, or there's anyway, the kind of double speak sometimes. You have to look at that because, and not just, okay, I know my time is out, not just the, right, so not just the double speak, but also the strategies, because I want to end by mentioning Professor Devenish when he was coaching me. We had to make a case to academic board under Professor Beckles, about why we should have an English language proficiency test unit. And we had handed in the papers and we're sitting out waiting to be called into the council room. And somebody came out with a folder and said, here, Professor Bettel said, you must look at that. And I opened it, and Professor Devany said, what are you doing? And I said, you know, we have to read it. He says, what are we going to do? Read it right now and go in there. And so, you know, the whole is not strategies that people use, political strategies that you use in union. That's where Prof knows everything from. So all of that, you have to be a real politician to really do well in this kind of environment that we have. And I'm going to close now. I wanted to close with the student voices, because the last thing that I have as an insight is look out for unexpected allies and surprising adversaries. And the students who have actually put out a video before we even got a chance to do about the course, telling other students what to expect and how it helps them and things. They have been our allies, as well as people in other areas that are not humanities, who have really bonded with us in terms of coalitions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daesh. And at this time, we have 10 minutes of questions, comments, and so the floor is now open.
Clive. Yeah, I just going to, while you're going up there, I just want you to hear one voice. I can't go without making you hear the student voice. Hold on, this is what?
Well, I did not know how to write for an academic audience. Because coming into the university, even though you went through CAVE and stuff, you normally write stories, but you did not know how to write for that different level. You know, you're in the university, so you need to know how to write for the academic sphere. So I didn't know that. So that was not a misconception, but a not knowing how to.
Don't go into the course, you know, expecting it to be a breeze. You know, expect to be writing a lot, and also if you're going to be writing a lot, you need to read a lot. Also, you know. Read from different sources. Be informed, stay current.
Okay.
Yes. So thank you, Carlin. That's a really good presentation, a very important discussion. And what you call Scott work in your presentation, I hear the term service teaching or service department mentioned a lot in North American universities, particularly at mine, University of Waterloo. And what I'd like to ask you is, how do you balance being a kind of service teaching or Scott work department or section of a department with being a department which has its own kind of research, its own identity, that kind of thing? Because it is the Scott work or the service work which actually brings in the dollars, right? You are guaranteed tenure track positions year over year if you can ensure that you'll always be teaching English courses to STEM students, right? You're guaranteed tenure track hires if you can continuously correct the essays of physics students. Fine, and this has been going on at universities all over the world. Humanities departments have always faced this. And I'm wondering if we should take sleep back that and look at what happened to the Department of Classics, which are now fighting to stay open, much less relevant nowadays because of what's the use of that kind of thing? How do you balance the two? You want an identity for yourself, but service teaching is where the money comes from. Yeah. What do you do?
Well, I don't think the university is at the point perhaps where you are in Canada, because what a lot of universities do and we do is that we have had to fight against is using a lot of adjunct staff. So it's not really that we get tenure. You will have a few people who will, you know, but a lot of our teaching comes by part-time, and we have had to fight to get full-time instructors. And obviously our research and public service takes a beating, you know, because you teach every student. And so it's really one of the things that the association will do is try to look at working conditions and make the powers that be realize that, you know, it's not a level playing field when it comes to a lot of the work that we do. And at the same time, of course, to try to get more staff and so that we are not as overworked. But I wouldn't say that the approach that we use in the Caribbean is to give the English people tenure. Maybe when we have STEM coming in, and would it be a lot of foreign language students doing STEM as well?
Right, yes, so that's the other thing in a lot of universities overseas.
Money, international. Right, right,
Foreign language learners.
right,
A lot of my students, for instance, that their first language is Mandarin,
right.
Punjabi, Gujarati,
Yeah.
Korean,
Yeah.
you name it.
But-
Right, their second language learners doesn't have
Yeah. Well,
a
I
language.
think
We're going in that direction. I mean, the university certainly is trying to court international students, and there have been discussions because the IELTS center, the testing center, is located within our department, and so that was very strategic on the department's part to say, okay,
you know, in the future, we want to be able to have
staff that can teach English as a foreign language, foreign, not not just a Creole speakers.
and then we have the testing and we can package it all. So there's been, so that's one way in which we'll be going, so, yeah. Okay.
It led to a kind of security that might not be called tenure for people who engage in sport work, but indefinite employment that can come faster than other people get tenure in their practice. There is that.
They're actually under Professor Devenish, there has been amazing activism and amazing achievements and that's why it was important to be here to speak about the language section in relation to Professor Devenish. And I think the link between language and linguistics has been very strong, and we see each other, in terms of the synergy. And but a lot of our achievements really, as I say, he has led the way. Okay. Oh, there.
Yeah, when you shared the Wignall article, I was just kind of wondering, to what extent has the English language section been able to convince the university that we have moved the Scott work beyond what we saw in the Wignall article, in the advocacy?
Yeah, I think I mentioned the whole business of the changing of the guard with respect to administrators and to the powers that be. It's always not circular, because you hope you have made some progress, but it always depends on who is leading at the top, because you'll have administrators who will come in who have these prejudices, linguistic prejudices, and so they come with the same old story about English as mother tongue and all of that, and so you have to now go and educate them. One thing we have done is to start publishing about the struggle and about issues to do with working conditions and what we do and the field of rhetoric and composition, academic literacy, whatever you want to call it. But I think we have to be, one of the things you have to be aware of is that the individual that calls the shots oftentimes, has a big say. And we're happy now that Dale Webber is principal, because he has partnered with Ingrid in writing across the curriculum in the life sciences. So he knows exactly what is the power of the courses that we offer. And I guess as we do more and more activism, then, we will reach a wider audience. But there's a lot of work to be done for you guys. Yes.
The key thing is that to get people professionalized, we have an academic argument. In our context, we have an industrial argument. And if we're making kind of alliances across the board. And the other thing that, you mentioned the issue of the West and so on, but the sense that like some of the other places that the department section has deliberately sought to make alliances in sciences as well as social sciences as a matter of policy. And I think that as a result, they have ended up being agents in a situation where elsewhere they're basically victims.
Let us put our hands together. Our next presentation comes to us from Ms. Elizabeth Montoya Steeman, titled Steeman, right? Steeman? Okay, she said Steeman, so I'm correct. Titled The School of Drama Students' Perceptions of Standard English, the Impact of Background on Confidence Levels in the use of language. Ms. Montoya Steeman is a lecturer, a senior lecturer at the Edna Manley College of Visual and Performing Arts, Kingston. She's also a voice and speech senior lecturer and HOD of Theatre Arts at the School of Drama. For more on Ms. Steeman, you can look at page 13 for the abstract of this presentation. All right, so at this time, without further ado, let us welcome Mrs. Montoya.
Okay, let us start this. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure for me and an honor to be here presenting this paper. Thank you to Professor Mead for all the work he has done. Okay, so the title of my research is School of Drama Students' Perceptions of Standard English, the Impact of Background on Confidence Levels in the Use of Language. So I teach voice and speech and acting, and I am an MPhil in linguistics from UWI. And then in my research, I linked my voice and speech teaching practice with the linguistic field. So, you know, in theater, a division of the performing arts, oral performance is one of the main skills of expression. Our students are going to be drama and education teachers and art professionals. So the objective of my research was to, that is based on empirical research, was carried out with students representing all 4 years of the School of Drama programs. And the objective of my research was to find out why these student performers, as I call them, student performers, they are not yet performers, but they are student starting to be performers. So student performers present a low level of confidence and diminished use of oral skills when performing a poetical text in standard Jamaican English to classmates and the School of Drama audience. So I will argue that this is due to the students' lack of direct relationship with the standard Jamaican English. As a result, the students lack the skills to analyze the text and extract its meaning. So this in turn means that they encounter challenges to transform a written text into an oral performance. We have to see the context of these students. So the language in Jamaica, Jamaica is considered a de facto bilingual society with two dominant forms, the Standard English and the Jamaican Creole, JC. So the functions of the two varieties are in complementary distribution in the society. This is why this linguistic situation is labeled as diglossial. So you know, as Elaine said, the general feeling is that Creole languages and dialects are defective, that they may be suitable for the expression of folklore, but that they are quite inadequate for the expression of complex and abstract thought. So in this diglossic context, different individuals display different levels of proficiency when using standard Jamaican English and Jamaican Creole. So a study conducted in 2006 by the Jamaican Language Unit collected information from 1,000 Jamaican respondents and found that 46.4% of the speakers consulted were able to code switch from JC and LJE. So LJE is also the language in which education is provided. So in acquisitional terms, LJE is the first language for some of the population and second language for the majority. language attitudes and notion of the standard is part of this background. So attitudes are the ideas and feelings that people have about language. So SJE is the official language and has the status of the standard in Jamaica. It's used by educated people like me and good positions in society. And JC, as any of the Caribbean English lexicon creoles, has not given an official status. So the notion of the standard language in Jamaica then is informed by the perception of the person who is using the language in a given speech community. Standard and non-standard speech varieties are related thus to specific groups of speakers and derive their prestige from the social status of the speakers. However, there was one researcher in Brickford in 1985 whose research was conducted in Guyana, has issues with this view that assumes a positive orientation toward the standard view variety alone. So he found evidence that language attitudes are multidimensional and that while selected speakers attach positive socioeconomic value to the use of a standard, which is of their prestige, they do not identify themselves with it on an affective level, which is covert prestige. So the attitudes towards SJE and JC in Jamaica could similarly be described as ambiguous, since the factors determining overt and covert prestige interact. So people may present ambiguous attitudes towards SJE because some see it as the language of the dominant social class or elite, but also as the medium of upward social mobility. And on the other hand, Jamaican Creole is the language Jamaicans associate positively with trust and that they use to talk to friends and family. So these ambiguities that I just mentioned are echoed in our drama students' reflections on their own levels of confidence when performing in SJE and JC. How our students are assessed in our educational system. So, Jamaican Creole dominant students graduate from the school unable to perform with the expected ideal competence in SJE. But only, as Christy says, a minority of secondary graduates are able to demonstrate competence in written and spoken English. The result is highlighted by different authors, Definition is one of them, that children from low-income homes that are not frequently exposed to SJE in written or spoken form attain poor assessment scores in school. So these assessment scores derive from written standardized tests, grade 4 literacy test, GSAT, and CSEC. So of the 40 schools where our school students graduated, of the 40 primary schools attended by our School of Drama students, there are 13 schools included in the National Education Inspectorate name reports. 7 schools are urban and 6 are rural. So the reports show patterns of unsatisfactory performance in the grade 4 literacy test and GSAT. So the NAE reports recommends in almost all schools reports that further action should be taken to improve the level of performance in the language arts and the teaching strategies in general. So literacy and language testing being mainly centered on the use of written form means that oral communication skills development is largely disregarded. The School of Drama offers BAs and BFA programs that expect proficiency in the English language. We have Bachelor of Arts in Drama and Education, Bachelor of Fine Arts in Acting, and the UWI Edemali College Bachelor of Arts in Drama. Applicants of the School of Drama are required to present 5 specific subjects in the CSEC, CAPE, and GCE combinations. So they have to present an audition where applicants perform a dramatic piece in Standard Jamaican English and another one in Jamaican Creole, an interview, and present the English proficiency test. So in the associate degree program, voice and speech classes are electives, but they are required in the bachelor programs. So this study that I did is centered on the oral performance of a cohort of Edna Manley College Visual and Performing Arts School of Drama students who attended or had attended voice and speech classes. Out of 46 student performers, in the School of Drama who participated in this research graduated from public, primary, and high schools. And few of them graduated from high scorer schools. So the majority obtained grades 2 and 3 on the CSEC English A examination. 8 obtained grade 1, which is excellent. 17 grade 2, very good. And 21 grade 3, good. So my direct class experience with the student performers suggests that the development of oral language skills in SJE poses a challenge for many of them. From my voice and speech classes experience, the students, I teach voice and speech in first and second semester, and then in the first semester they have to present, analyze, prepare, and select texts ranging from informative, like newspapers, articles, to poetical text written in JC and SJE. And then for the second semester, the tasks are sight reading of narrative text, presenting a Shakespearean sonnet, and telling a story that they create. Students are assessed for voice production, speech clarity, interpretation, and presentation of the text. In the interpretation criterion, phrasing of the text is assessed, and also the skill to create the mood of the text with conviction and believability. Presentation assesses use of gestures, physical energy, composure, and eye contact with audience. So different students present different weaknesses on these tasks. So in my experience, student performers struggle with the literal meaning of words, with the interconnection of meaning between the different lines of the stanzas of the poem, and with the fact that the analysis of meaning should go beyond the initial response to the poem. So when presenting the poems, it often seems that they lack understanding of the purpose of the text. This is signaled by the use of intonation, which becomes monotonous. How I did this? Well, the method adopted was first to collect student performers' metadata and audio data, and then to analyze it to establish correlations between the student performers' self-declared level of confidence when performing in SJE and their actual oral performance. So then I created questionnaires to collect information about their individual assessment of their level of confidence when performing in JC and SJE, explanations for their selection, and the language background of the students. And 46 students, the 80% of the total number of students at the School of Drama participated in this research. So here is the oral performance assessment. As you observe, first they were assessed by level of understanding, and then use of prosody, and they were given values for poor, acceptable, good, very good, and outstanding. So students' performances, irrespective of the year in the program, were mostly assessed as acceptable. Then we have the level of confidence questionnaire, and we ask 2 questions. How do you feel performing in Jamaican? And how do you feel performing in standard English? And explain the reason for your answer. The minimum level of confidence is 1, and the maximum level is 5. And they have to explain the reasons for that level of confidence in written. Here we have, they also have to select their level of confidence when speaking and when performing. So when speaking and performing in JC, the level of confidence is self-reported as higher in comparison with the values given for SJE. So what we see here. So you see the students for first, second, third, fourth, and fourth year. And then we observe performing and speaking in JC and SJE. And we see that they are, when speaking and performing in JC, the level of confidence is self-reported as higher in comparison with the values given for SJE. Then, level of confidence performing in JC and SJE. We have these 2 tables to see the results. And the table shows that the level of confidence 4 and 5 when performing in JC on the left are predominant. Majority of students gather around level 3 for level of confidence in SJE. So now, why they gave themselves that level of confidence? We're going to analyze those results. So at level 5, most of the students, as I said before, reported themselves at level of confidence 5 for JC. So out of 46, 25 students placed themselves at the maximum level of confidence and 15 at level 4. The reasons, as we will see, disclose a native language competence that is associated with feelings of not just confidence, but even self-satisfaction when performing in JC. So I feel very comfortable performing Jamaican Patois. This is my mother tongue, so I feel relaxed when performing. I can get to express myself more, able to share it with family, friends, and even teachers, and express who I am as a Jamaican. I love to perform in Jamaican Patois. Embracing it is one of my passions. Strong appreciation for dialect Patois. So there are other reasons, like linguistic and technical reasons that you see here. Fluent in JC, easier to memorize, no grammar problems, Patois rules are few, not worry about making mistakes, no pronunciation problems. JC is not more complex than any other performance. Then if we observe the type of reasons given at this level of confidence, we see that there were some recurrent elements that the students used to explain their high level of confidence in JC. These were labeled as affective, as you see in red. When stating the performer's relationship with the language, those are feeling at ease, comfortable, is my mother language, expressiveness, identity and culture, love for the language. And then in the graphic also we observe that almost all the reasons given for this level of confidence are positive, are effective. And then at level of confidence 5, there are no problems with the use of JC. Students have a genuine connections with the language that they learn as a mother language. They feel comfortable. At this level, only one student performer commented on having problems with the written form, stated that the written form differs from the way that it is spoken. So if we do a summary of the reasons given for the level of confidence, we see that JC is the most appreciated language among the student performers. Expressiveness is a recurrent element at level of confidence 3 and 5, and at level of confidence 4, making the connection between the written word and its pronunciation affects negatively their oral performance and lowers their level of confidence when performing in JC. There are 8 students, performers at this level of confidence 5 in SJE. This level expressing a considerable variety of reasons different from the reasons given in level of confidence 5 in Jamaican Creole. So as you see, from early years was encouraged to be bilingual, have learned and gravitated to LJE, and is now just as familiar as my mother tongue language, not having problems calling the word, less grammatical mistakes. And then when we analyze the reasons that most of the students gave a level of confidence 3, we see the largest number of the students, 21 out of 46, are self-reported at this level of confidence. So in contrast with the types of reasons given for level of confidence 4, 28 extra negative reasons related to linguistics, in blue there. So there are 11 student performers who identify pronunciation problems, and 5 technical challenges appear here in white and green. So in the graphic, most of the reasons given to explain the self-reported level of confidence in SJE are negative, and most of them are related to being insecure about pronunciation of the written text. So the reasons given at the level of confidence 3 in SJE are affective, ambivalent, technical, and linguistics. The challenges found at the level of confidence 2 and 3 are related to pronunciation, insecurity about SJE grammar, and not being fluent in SJE. I find this and implications. Here it's important to note that the reasons given as explanations for the self-reported level of confidence when performing in SJE as compared to those given for JC don't have any recurrent elements in common. The confidence level for JC relates to a linguistic relationship stated as mother language or most spoken language. In all, the reasons given for confidence in JC confirm the dominant status of JC in student performers' lives. In contrast, for SJE, the level of confidence is related to a technical level of competence that requires time and personal effort to reach. So technical competence plays a role in level of confidence in JC in the more limited sense of an ability to read JC. And if we see the background of the challenges that the students have, when considering the reasons given by the student performance, it was observed that as the level of confidence decreases in SJE, also the number of positive and affective reasons given decreases. So most of the student performers are self-reported at level of confidence 3, 21 students, and 12 students at level of confidence 4. So the thing is, JC remains the language of the oral competence. There is not enough exposure or opportunities to interact with fluent SJE speakers, and the limited use of SJE in the classroom is not sufficient for the development of SJE's oral competence across the same range as JC. Written competence doesn't equip them to use the language with confidence orally. So we need an intervention here. An intervention will be necessary at the School of Drama to address the level of communicative competence and student performers' self-confidence that can support the oral performance. Our programs need to be reoriented to develop language confidence and competence. More voice and speech classes are needed, but overall, more than that, is a system that needs to reinforce the relationship with SJE across the board. Student performers need to develop a more communicative relationship with SJE that empowers them to interpret meaning and sense with skill. Thank you very much.
Very interesting presentation, and it's interesting to see the level of confidence for students who are using Jamaican Creole in your classroom. Higher than English. But as I listened and I looked at some of the reasons, I was wondering if it was because of the kind of task that they were required to do. I'm not sure if you mentioned that in the presentation, like what was the performance task? So that's the first question that I have. And the second one was, so I've seen students in a course called L28J, which is a course which is taught in this department, and my own course at York University, who are Jamaicans, who are approaching an oral test in Jamaican Creole with so much anxiety. And a part of this is because during the course, you are instructed that here is the grammar of Jamaican. The verbs don't conjugate. There is no subject-verb auxiliary to form an interrogative. This is how pronouns work, and you learn the grammar in such detail that when you come to do an oral test in this language that you've always been using, you are now anxious. In which case, the level of confidence, because of the kind of task, is lower. Do you think that if you change the task to something else, you might find that the level of confidence might fluctuate? So those are the two questions.
For this research, I used a poem. They receive a poem 2 months in advance, and they have to present the poem. It's called Flowers. By Dennis Craig. They present other tasks. They have to read from newspapers, articles from newspapers. They have to perform poems in Jamaican Creole and Standard Jamaican English, poems that they select, poems that they like. So you see, we have problems when they perform in JC because the written form is like foreign for them. And then when they perform in a standard Jamaican English, they don't understand the words. Or if they understand the words, they are not familiar with the meaning of the words and how to use them in poetry. So I think the fact that they use a poem could pose just a challenge for them in the sense that it's not everyday language that we use, but it's poetical language, which this poem is nothing complex, it's very simple. But they have to perform many tasks. Also just talk in class about something that is happening in the world. They present challenges. When they present a poem, there are challenges. When they have to read for the newspaper, also present challenges. When they have to go to the library and read poems in order to select one, they don't like to read. So they say, please just give us the poem, miss. Please don't send us to the library. Just tell us what poem to do. So they don't like to read. That should be another topic for another research. But yeah, they do different tasks. They always have challenges.
As English. And I'm wondering, if you sat down, if you get the rules, what will it do to your confidence? Because there's this idea that once you open your mouth wide, you're talking patois, right? Once you can hit those low vowels, it's patois, you're all right. But when you start to learn the rules in any great detail, and you realize that you weren't really using Jamaican, strictly speaking, all along, what might that do to your confidence? Or should we continue this ignorance is bliss, just open your mouth and talk the patois?
Well, I think they need to be taught English. Because when they enter a school, teachers assume that they speak English, and they start speaking English, and many of them are Jamaican Creole speakers. And so they need to be taught English. And I talk to them and say, look, I speak Spanish, and I speak English, and then I was taught English, so it's about learning the language. But when we assume that you already speak English, and you need to be taught, or to do more exercises to differentiate the grammar between Jamaican Creole and Standard English, there is a problem there because they cannot make a choice. When they decide to speak English, they don't know how to do it. They need to be taught how to do it. No more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much again, Mrs. Montoya Steeman, for that very interesting presentation. At this time, we have our next presentation comes to us from Doctors Rocky Mead and Nicole Scott, titled, Is There a Role for Bilingual Education in National Security? A Case for a Group of Unattached Youth in Jamaica. Dr. Nicole Scott has particular interest in the area of descriptive linguistics, particularly in the area of Trinidadian French Creole. She wants to put on the table that she had been supervised by Professor Devonish and Professor Robertson. Dr. Scott has been working in the area of teacher education, and she is the Deputy Dean of the Graduate School of Education at the Michael University College. Dr. Rocky Mead has particular interest and expertise in the area of language acquisition and phonology. He has had a long-standing association with the Department of English, Linguistics, and Philosophy, and also the Jamaica Language Unit. He has taught a range of courses, and other area of interest is bilingual education. He currently serves as the Chief of Defense of the staff at the Jamaica Defense Force. At this time, let us welcome Doctors Mead and Scott.
Good afternoon, everyone. I can assure you that he is running from the office of the Prime Minister now to catch this presentation. So he says he will be here. But if he's not, I will go right ahead. So I am also honored to be here celebrating the work of Professor Devonish. He's a true researcher, I think, who believes there is a researcher in all his students. And because of his belief, he has gone beyond the call of duty for his supervisors. He has gone beyond the call of duty to prove his hypothesis, I think. And I'm here today because of this great man. So I'm honored to be here. So you heard the topic and the title of our presentation. I was speaking to Clive in the summer, and he said, I can see you're really going to try to pair, national security and patois. And he said, I can see the headlines in the paper, patois, the solution to crime in Jamaica. And we might be onto something, but let's see. So one evening, as I was teaching a 5 to 8 class, a student came and said to me, Miss, me have to leave. So I have to leave. She said, I have to leave because I might get robbed if I go home after nightfall. So she was very scared, and she took up her bag and she left. So she had a story, but I think too, the robber had a story. Notice on the little cartoon here, it says, I prefer to call it profit sharing when he's holding up the person. So he has a story. Now people get involved in criminal activities for many reasons. Idealism, of course, and survival. So we hear constantly, man have to eat a food, the picnic them have to go to school, my baby mother want a thing. Now, crime is no respecter of person, and we know that. No age, no creed, no anything. And I'm not talking here about white-collar criminals, those who are educated and are doing those things. No, I'm talking about the people who are uneducated and who need to survive. So is there a role for bilingual education in national security? This is supposed to be the beginnings of a case study of a group of unattached youth in Jamaica. Now, by unattached, this is what we mean. These are people who are between 18 and 23 years. They are unemployed, or if they have some kind of employment, it's haphazard, it's occasional, short-term, and they generally do menial tasks, and they are not enrolled in an educational institution. So what we want to do here is to raise the question of whether bilingual education may have improved the prospects of unattached youth in Jamaica and the inference for Creole speakers more generally. Now, the need for bilingual education has been in the media for a long time. And you know of the bilingual education project. So at the policy level, it has always been there. But full implementation has never been achieved. So the project, the pilot project, went on in 2004 to 08 with the approval of Parliament, but its full implementation was not funded. So we are just talking. So policymakers still seem to be deciding how granting the right to freedom from discrimination on the ground of language would affect an education system which, at least, officially, English is the medium of instruction. And they are also dealing with another kind of issue, and this is it. How are we going to sell bilingual education to the general population when there is still such negative ideologies and, may we say, hostilities regarding the use of Jamaican Creole in English? And if you looked at the Sunday Gleaner, Daniel Thwaites, I think, would have written a paper about all that, the work of academics in this regard. So for the people, especially for the students, Jamaica is typologically bilingual, but that doesn't mean that bilingualism is widespread. Winford says, we have this continuum situation. Some of you students might have heard about that. So you have a spectrum of varieties, but that is operating with diglossic features. Functional separation of, say, English and Jamaican Creole, but you have a spectrum of varieties. Now, Fox indicates that about a quarter of unattached youth attained only a grade 9 or lower level kind of education, and less than 5% had tertiary education. The majority had little or no qualification. When we looked at the 2014 survey of living conditions in Jamaica, we saw that significantly more unattached youth lived below the poverty line with lower educational levels. So here's where we're going. So we're making the link now to these unattached youth and education. Our assumption is that many unattached youth command the spectrum or that space in the continuum between the mesolect and the basilect. Some of them are passive bilingual. So if you talk to them in probably regular things, how are you, they're able to answer, they're able to understand some things. But it doesn't mean full competence. It doesn't mean they can read an academic text and understand and write in English, as you heard from the other presenters. And they don't command the full spectrum of the continuum because of factors related to their home situation, to the school, to geography, to several things. Now, when we look at the educational system in Jamaica, you're going to see that there is a lack of equity. So, primary education up to age 12 is almost universal. But you are selected for high school. There's a selection process. So, some people would have gone through common entrance, some would have gone through GSAT, and the new thing is PEP. Everybody is complaining about PEP and how that will be implemented. And from my teaching practice experience, going out into the schools, looking at what the students have been doing, they still use standard English to deliver the content to children who are mostly vernacular speakers. That's just it. But you also have them using occasionally Jamaican Creole to ensure that the concepts are understood as per the Jamaican language policy. So the examination that you take in primary school determines the nature of the high school education that you get. There is no equity there. There is no equity in terms of resources, in terms of stimulation. So if you get a low grade, and I think the ministry is still trying to address these things. You get a low grade, you're going to go to a low performing school. And there's a lot of time wasting going on in many of the schools. So you have that situation. So you're not performing well. You're going into a high school situation where the teachers determine who is going to sit the CSEC examinations. And if you are going to lower the reputation of the school, in many instances, or the teacher, the institution or the teacher, then you're not going to be selected to do the subjects. That's just how it is. So Craig 06 notes that of all the secondary students, secondary school students, only 9.75% of them who could manage to take CSEC. The question is, what has happened to the rest of them? They have, in essence, become the unattached youth. And could they be contributing to some of the criminal activities that we are trying to fight now? So in the absence of other indicators, the selection for secondary schooling and the entrance to secondary school examination provides some kind of background for us understanding the problem that we have in the education system. We have low quality at the primary level, and it's especially true for reading and writing and numeracy. Reading skills and writing skills and numeracy skills determine how fully children are integrated into society, and they provide a base for secondary education. So what I'm saying in essence is that the system sets many children up to become unattached. Now, I said to you earlier that most of the people who are unattached command the part of the spectrum between, mesolectal and basilectal varieties. And Craig says vernacular speakers are showing lower rates of educational progress than any other comparable group in the US and in the Caribbean, where these speakers constitute the vast majority of the population. Educational failure remains a major stumbling block to rapid social and economic development. So here is a national security situation in Jamaica. And now is where I expect Rocky to be running in, but he's not coming, so we press on. So here's a national security situation in Jamaica. In 2017, we had over 1,600 murders, and that's higher than many war zones. We have the highest per capita in the region, but there have been various intervention programs. So you know of the zones of special operations, the state of emergency, and the Jamaican National Service Corps. Now I'm going to be talking about the Jamaican National Service Corps and how it relates to what we are doing. Now the intention of JNSC is to train approximately 1,000 recruits per year. And after the year, they would be employed. And it's really skills-based training that they do at the JDF and in other public sector entities too. And what they do is counted as reckonable service towards retirement benefits for those who end up enlisting in the JDF or other arms of the public sector. Now, just over the weekend, they had a group of people who, what they call, passed out. So I got first-hand evidence that they are actually doing something. So they passed out. Somebody that I knew started saying ma'am, rough and tough. And they rubbed him down so much he was saying ma'am. So they're, yeah, that was actually very surprising. So the recruits were asked several things, and I'm just sharing with you a few of those things. So what programs are or were you part of within the JDF? And over 80% would have been part of the Jamaica National Service Corps. We had more males than females, but in the cohort that passed out this over the weekend, there were many more females than they would usually admit. And most of them fall into the age group that we are interested in. They fall into that 18 to 23 year age group. Now they were asked to indicate which of the following is applicable prior to joining the JDF. So did they have a full-time job, or they held a part-time job, or were they unemployed? If you add the number who would have held a part-time job, the same seasonal kind of occupation that I was talking about, or haphazard occupation, and those who were unemployed, you realize that that is over 54%. So I'm just establishing for you that these people were in fact unattached. They were asked, how long were you seeking employment? So if you are to leave high school, say at 17 or 18, how long were you seeking employment or seeking something to do? And you would realize that most of them, if you add those with 12 to 24 months, you'll realize too that that's what, 20, 29, 50, yeah, little over 50% of them would have been seeking employment for at least a year. So they have nothing to do. They're unattached. You remember I started out by saying people have to survive? So what are they going to do to survive during that time? I'm leaving that question open. That is the, I think that one says the same thing. But interestingly, they were also asked, what would have happened? What do you think would have happened to you had you not joined this program, that's the JNSC? And many of them responded that they would have probably resorted to a life of crime. And that's very instructive for us, we think. Now, Quintin and Martin say countries use a variety of instruments to improve the labor market situation of youth. And I want you to take note of the sections that are highlighted. There is agreement that in order to improve youth job prospects, it is essential to combat school failure. So I tell you, our system is failing. Only 9.75% was able to sit CSEC. Yes? In particular, early and sustained intervention can help prevent a vicious cycle of cumulative disadvantages. That is what we want to happen. Sustained intervention. Most countries have only started to tackle the issue, mostly through reforms of initial education aimed at guaranteeing equity of its provision. And it says by reinforcing vocational education for students not attracted to general studies. Now, this is what the JNSC, the Jamaica National Service Corps, is trying to do, is trying to address. So is there a link to crime? So Clive, is there a link to crime? We don't have any conclusive data for Jamaica. But if you notice that we found research that says that there is a link in other jurisdictions between inadequate education and crime. So it might be the same. So since the inception of the JNSC program just over a year ago, and again, we're tentative in the correlations that we're making, but there has been a steady reduction in crime. And this is up to the 30th of June. The bottom chart is telling you about what's happening in St. James, one of the hot spots. Yes? Now, up to this Sunday, notice that in 2018 so far, we've had 1,042 murders, and it's broken down there. And the year is not finished yet, we know. But at least thus far, it is less. So several interventions have been taking place, several interventions have been taking place. So we can't specifically say, you know, it is what the JNSC is doing that's causing any of this to happen, because there are several factors. There's also that too, yeah. Some things are happening though. Now some people say, well, since I just need to survive, why don't we just employ them? That can work. Wouldn't that reduce the crimes of necessity that threaten national security? And the answer is yes, maybe, but why not just fix the problem? Why not fix the problem? So the question is, how might bilingual education affect the prospects for reducing crime and preserving national security? We are saying we need to reform initial education to guarantee equity. So we want to make children literate in Jamaican Creole and Standard English. We want the bilingual education program that was put on the table by Professor Devonish to be brushed off and really implemented. And what are the spin-off effects of this? More students should perform well at the primary and secondary levels. Better performance means better prospects for furthering education and for finding gainful employment. Gainful employment and or higher education reduces the number of youth with this unattached status. And less unattached youth could translate into a decrease in the occurrence of crimes of necessity which threaten national security. So we are seeing a few correlations, but we are saying more long-term controlled experiments that test the correlations need to be done. And we're saying too that there is a greater chance of sustained change if there is equity in initial education. So a sustained bilingual education program is an option that we think should not be ignored. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Scott, for that very, very relevant. Presentations weren't relevant, but you understand what I'm saying. Very timely presentation. At this time, in the interest of time, as we know, we will take 3 quick questions and or comments.
I was just wondering, thanks for the presentation, I was just wondering why you were so conservative with your conclusion that bilingual education is an option should not be ignored, rather than it should be an option that should be promoted.
Right. What I am more tentative about, I think, are the correlations. We have to do more controlled study to say there is a correlation between you being unattached and you participating in criminal activities. So we are convinced that bilingual education will work. So that's what I'm tentative about, not that. So we're confident it can work. Yes. Oh, sorry. Oh, Rania.
Hi, afternoon. Afternoon. I was just wondering if you think that if Jamaican Creole is incorporated in the education system, if that will limit the people who are verbose in that section, because we all know that standard English is a franca lingua of the entire world. So do you feel that if they don't also learn standard English, that will limit them to just the Jamaican jobs and they won't have an opportunity to expand to the greater society?
All right. And you have a concern that many Jamaicans have, but what we're advocating here is not one at the expense of the other. We're saying use what the students know. This is what most of them are coming to school with. So I can tell you, I go to the teaching practice sessions, and I can give you a very quick example. So this is a literature class, and they were reviewing some kind of text, and the teacher asked the student to say how you would feel if you were the main character. And I looked over into the book of a student, and she wrote, I would feel, F-E-E-L-A-W-A-Y. I would feel away. Right, so I said to her, what do you mean by you'd feel away? She could not find English words for feeling away, but you know what it means to feel away in Jamaican Creole. So the students the reality is, that's what the students know. So we are saying, use what they know to help them to survive generally and to know what you want them to know, since English is so important. Yes, Sherlan, the last one. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Trying to get them to write expressively. And I said to the class, you have one task. I want a volunteer to come up, and I want you to tell me about your most favorite experience that you had. Anything at all, whatever it is, whatever made you extremely happy, tell me about that experience. One rule, must be in English. The young lady who had volunteered, she stood up there for the entire, like 5 minutes. And she stood there for the 5 minutes, and I think I got maybe 4 sentences. This is something that was her best experience, the thing that made her most happy. And I said, okay, I'm going to change the rule. I want you to tell me that same story, but use patois. Tell me about it. 15 minutes later, we're still there, and she's still talking. So I used that experience, that practical example to say to them that it's not that you don't know what to say. It's not that you don't have ideas. The problem is the choice, the language choice. So when you package your ideas in a particular language, it limits you in terms of what it is that you have to say. And I help them to understand that being Creole speakers don't mean you're not intelligent. So that was the objective of it.
Thank you very much.
as well, and I'm currently marking stories. And the student, the same example, feel away, so the student would write, Mr. Scott, the boys hated, or Mr. Scott hated the boys because they always trouble him. So we know that in Creole or in English that means to tease, but because of, again, the not being able to do that translation, then the student is not able to equate trouble him in a Creole context to tease. So again, another reason why the bilingual education is necessary. I just wanted to point out that even though you are being very cautious and very guarded on that link, between the bilingual education or an approach, right, to unattached youth, it's actually the reality, because in an article Ronald Gates wrote probably 2 Sundays ago about the language of PEP being the problem, the language is the problem, he pointed out just that with GSAT, because the structure of the questions were multiple choice, then the students, probably through familiarity, which is very different from understanding and context, the students would probably be able to pick up a few things and probably just patch their way through rote learning. But with PEP, the language that is being used, if you do not have a particular grasp of the language, then that unattachment that you speak of is going to start much more earlier than in high school, because the children in primary school who are coming up, I have co-workers who are parents who have children with PEP, and they're gathered in the staff room deconstructing the PEP questions so that they can help their children. Much more so to say the children who will be faced with these questions that are structured in this way that suggest that you already know the language. So the unattachment that you speak of will start much earlier than high school with the introduction of PEP.
Right. In the interest of time, I think we're all in agreement with that. So we don't want more unattached youth. Let's dust off that policy and put it into practice. Yeah?
Thank you so very much, Dr. Scott. I'm so sorry. I know 2 of our colleagues had their hands up, but we are really out of time at this time. But you may speak with Dr. Scott afterwards to share your views. So, colleagues, to all our presenters who participated in this segment, and to everyone who participated